Matthew McConaughey delivered a passionate speech at the White House where he talked about the victims of Uvalde, laid out common sense gun reform that should be done, and said, "We're less divided than they want you to believe." Actor Matthew McConaughey was from Uvalde, Texas, so he went after the mass shooting at Robb Elementary and met with a lot of the victims' families. And this gave him kind of a unique perspective on the whole situation. So then he went to the White House and told the stories of a lot of these victims, their hopes, their dreams, and how devastating it is that they died. I definitely encourage you to watch the entire speech on your own. It's very, very inspiring. But there's a couple parts I want to focus in on for this video. The first is he really clearly lays out what should be done on gun control. So I think someone like him who comes from Texas and clearly stated that he understands the importance of the Second Amendment and all that stuff, laid out really nicely from a really interesting perspective the types of common sense gun reforms that we should implement. Let's quickly take a look at him laying those out.
We need responsible gun ownership. Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks. We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21. We need a waiting period for those rifles. We need red flag laws and consequences for those who abuse them. These are reasonable, practical, tactical regulations to our nation, states, communities, schools, and homes.
So I think that's super agreeable. And it is true that most of America is totally on board with these types of actions. We understand that it's not violating the Second Amendment to have common sense, very simple regulations on these dangerous weapons. And I think it is important when we say common sense gun reform to quickly always be laying out what we mean by that. Because I've had a few conversations with people who say, I hear that all the time, but what do people actually mean? I don't know what they mean by common sense gun reform. So list off background checks, red flag laws, raising the age, waiting period. Because when people hear that list, it's like, well, of course we should do that. How is that not already a part of our systems? So then the second big moment I want to look at is he said, we are less divided than they, I guess the media or people in power, want us to believe.
Let's come to the common table that represents the American people. Find a middle ground, the place where most of us Americans live anyway, especially on this issue. Because I promise you, America, you and me, we are not as divided as we are being told we are. No.
Now that's definitely something I agree with. Social media, the nature of it, the algorithms, uplift things that get the most engagement. Well, what gets the most engagement? Really provocative stuff, super fringe stuff, extreme stuff where people are gonna argue about it. And then also, same game is played with all of the media. What does really well viewership wise? Things that are the most controversial, the most provocative, all of that stuff. And so we're being told by all the sources we go to, the other side is a monster, blah, blah, blah. And while there are some scary parts of the other side, the point that I think Matthew McConaughey is trying to make is a lot of us are on the same page on a lot of issues. And because we have to pick a side, we kind of drift into the partisan camps. But when thinking about solutions that are so necessary, we don't have to be in those partisan camps. We can unite around the idea that these are very logical, they're common sense, and they're very agreeable. And if we can spend more time talking about what we do agree on and not just the most controversial topics, we could make more progress in this country. But I do think, while I understand why he didn't say it this way, it was definitely good for his delivery to come off very neutral. If you're honestly assessing the situation, you do see everyone who is to the left of center, all the way to the most radical left person you would ever see, is totally great just doing a list of very common sense things. While someone way on the left, of course, would want maybe more regulations, they would definitely sign on to a bill that is stripped down and only the stuff that everyone can get on board with. Whereas the right and Republicans who are in power, they don't want to do anything. They're the ones standing in the way. So I think it's less of a, oh, it's the extremes on both sides ruining everything. While there are extremes on both sides, there's dummies on both sides for sure. I realize that. On this issue, pretty much everyone on the left is great to just do anything in regard to gun control. That we can get done. Whatever it is, we'll take it. Let's do it. Whereas the right are the ones who are standing in the way. So for his message, he did it great. You can't say that. For mine, we do have to make it clear who's really standing in the way of this progress. It's not just because we're listening to the fringe on both sides. It's because the right side is held hostage by their fringe. And so then they won't do anything. Even Republicans would agree to common sense gun reform like what we discussed. So I think more people need to be laying out the message on gun reform like Matthew McConaughey did. And we just have to keep pushing, because I don't care how hard it is. I don't care how impossible it seems. We have to get something done on gun control. It has been way too long of tragedy after tragedy, thoughts and prayers, nothing's done. So we can't let off the gas. We can't let this drift away and the conversation kind of dissipates. No, we need to keep on it until the people in power do something.